We're going to talk about cloud today. What's it look like to embrace the cloud, to jump in? Quick question. When you think about cloud, and scream them out at me, what do you think? What comes to top of mind when you think about cloud? What? Rain? That's not the cloud we're talking about today. What else? Security, yes. What else? Flexibility, love it. What? Open, yes. Not all the time, but we're going to talk about open a lot today. Who's scared of it? Yeah. Who's confused about it? All right. Well, I am a glass half full person, and I think that this is an opportunity. And like Andy said, I've been on the customer side most of my career. I joined Juniper about 5 years ago. But before that, that's what I did, was built networks for a living, right? I led architecture teams. We talked about networking. We built networks. We evaluated products. I was a Juniper customer way longer than I actually worked for Juniper. I've never seen an inflection point in our industry. So I've been doing this almost 18 years. I've never seen an inflection point like this where there is just so much opportunity and so much change happening. But with that, at the same time, there's this uncertainty. There is no book right now that you can go read that is single-handedly going to tell you how to go build a network. You can't get a certification in how to go build a cloud. We also talk about SDN. I'm surprised nobody had screamed that out. And very quickly, we often jump in to say, well, I need SDN to have a cloud or to have cloud-like services, to get that agility that we just talked about, or to make sure it's secure. So with that today, hopefully what I'll do in the next 45 minutes is open your eyes a little bit, get you to think about what your network is going to look like a year from now, 2 years from now, 4 years from now, 7 years from now. If you haven't done that already, it's probably really important to think, what do you want? What do you want your network to do for you? What do you want your IT infrastructure to do to you? We'll try and talk about that a little bit, and then I'll be around throughout the day, throughout the evening. If you guys want to have any conversations, it's always great to hear your stories. So, well, 3 parts today. We'll talk about industry perspectives. We'll talk about what your journey starts to look like. How do you go from where you are today, traditional legacy IT data centers? I'm assuming that's where most of you are probably, and jump into this world, this new world, this next generation data center. And then we'll talk to you about what Juniper calls our Metafabric architecture. So your business challenges. Well, I get a chance to talk to a lot of customers. I hear a lot of stories, get a lot of feedback from our sales teams out in the field. And a lot of the feedback that comes back is pretty standard. And I picked a few of them, right? How do I embrace cloud? I hear this if I'm a CIO or a business decision maker. What do I do with this technology? Where do I start? How do I jump in? How do I avoid dead ends? To me, this is one of the biggest ones. How do I make sure that what I'm doing today is going to last me 2, 3, 5 years, and I don't have to make this huge investment? Lynn talked about being a CIO. The shortest way to get fired as a CIO is to have to go back to the well for money that you said was going to last a certain amount of time, right? Because it's still on your books, and that's a lot of juggling. So that's a pretty big deal. How do I innovate without disrupting my business? I still have a business that runs today. So I want to do all this cool stuff, but I have existing gear, I have existing IT infrastructure that I have to be mindful of. I have customers that connect to my network. Not all of us are lucky enough to be building a greenfield environment. And then what's that return on investment look like? Does it even make sense for me to jump into some of these new technologies, or am I better off just doing what I'm doing? I think sometimes we get so excited about this next generation without really thinking about what it is. And for example, a lot of people say, well, I want to start deploying SDN. Let's say, all right, well, let's back up for a second and talk about what you really need. So with that, your desired outcomes turn into results, right? Or your business challenges, turn into desired outcomes. So if you're the decision maker, or you're the CIO, or you're the guy that has to spend the money, or the girl that has to spend the money, you start thinking about, okay, these are my challenges, but what do I really want? And if you're not thinking about that, I encourage you to do so. So the first thing is agility. Somebody in my audience said agility when I asked what you talk about cloud. By far, this is probably one of the biggest things that we're looking for. You ultimately, if you're building a network, designing a network, buying a network, deploying a network, have a customer that connects to it. Either it's an internal customer in your company, an external customer that is buying services from you, but you need to move at their pace. You ultimately need to move and grow as they grow. If they need more servers, they need more resources, you need to be able to provision that as quickly as possible, or you lose your competitive edge, or you dissatisfy your employees. And that is, I think what you said was very, very important that sometimes we overlook, how important the people that work in our company, at the end of the day, the stuff that we do as network engineers, network architects, it's not the sexiest stuff in the world. It's like the electric in your house. It's just expected to work, and it's expected to work quickly. So how do we do that? And when we talk about cloud technologies, this is certainly the direction that enables this. Reduction in costs. I encourage you not to think always about reduction in cost as the price of the box you build today. The reduction in cost is, how do I get 2 people that only worked 8 hours to get longer support? It's that operational model. How do I do more with less in the long run? That's where the big savings starts to really be applied as we talk about building this new world. Enhancing your user experience. This is by far the probably most important piece of your outcomes is whoever is your customer, either internal or external, are we making them happy? Can we respond to the needs that they have quickly enough? And just some of the stories that you talk, sometimes we don't even realize that it's a life or death situation, or we overlook how important, uptime actually becomes, or the ability to respond. And then lastly is to make sure, I think Andy looked at my slides, but to make sure that security is totally, fully integrated. I don't think there's a day that goes by that if anyone reads any technology information, we're looking at how much hacking and how many different types of attacks are being done to Home Depot, to Target, to every big company out there. So security absolutely has to be fully integrated into your design from day one. All right, so big picture, what's going on? If you're in the enterprise part of the world, Gartner says or tells us that, M. Forrester, and pretty much any analyst research you read out there, that about 72% of mid to large enterprise customers are actually actively working on projects that are building private cloud networks inside their data center. The reason I think it's important to share that information with you is, are you thinking about it? Are you not thinking about it? Are you too late? Are you too early? This is the right time, I think, to at least be considering it and planning for it. And then if you're on the service provider side, well, there's a heck of a lot of revenue generation from the services that are being moved into public cloud and to public cloud and managed hosting type services. All right, so if you are the guy that's building it though, then there's something you have to think about, right? Does your network actually support this next generation of technology? Are we prepared to move into this next generation? If you look in 2009, just a little more data, 30% virtualized compute, meaning 30% of your workload was actually virtualized, living on a virtual server, 70% still resided on physical appliances. Look at where we're going to be by 2016. 71% virtual, 29% physical. There's a lot of customers I talk to today that are 100% virtualized. What this also means, though, if you're the network guy and this server virtualization is rapidly happening in your network, either with or without you realizing how fast it's ramping up, that also means that you have a lot more to contend with inside the data center. Your switches that all these devices connect to, are they prepared to handle that increase in MAC address scale, the increase in possible need for VLANs, the need for VM mobility around your data center? These are important things that you have to start to plan for because, believe it, whether or not you think it or not, this increase is happening. So with that, we're going to talk a little bit about Metafabric, and just to show you, just to prove to you that Juniper is actually for real, and we do actually deploy these networks, and we're helping a lot of big customers build out these networks. We have AT&T in our service provider space, Nike, who's just a big enterprise customer, UBS, huge Metafabric customer, $125 million deal. They just signed the deal, inked with Juniper about 6 months ago. So these are huge customers that are embracing next generation networking technologies. And I'd say the common theme in all of these, whether or not you're service provider or on the enterprise side, is that everyone has this realization that they want to have a next generation network. They want to be more agile. They want to be able to respond to their customers' needs much quicker. And with that, there's a lot of planning that goes into it. All right, so who are you? I think you have to self-assess and you have to self-diagnose. It's a very important part of this process as we decide how we're going to build. So are you a commercial buyer? Do you like VMware? Do you like what they have to offer? I hope so. They have really good stuff. They're a phenomenal partner of Junipers. And we, especially in our enterprise, we don't see VMware really going anywhere anytime soon. They add so much value to your business. But as we move into this next generation, what VMware offers with NSX, you have to think differently about what your network can offer. Then there's the open source, OpenStack, CloudStack, Open Daylight. These are the people that tend to be a little frustrated. They want to do things outside the norm. They need some moderate customization. They don't want to do it all themselves, but they like what the open source community offers them. And I tend to see a lot of this being a hybrid between these two. Yes, I have a lot of VMware, but I also have some customization, some flexibility, want to change my operating model about, and they have to coexist in the environment. And that's something to keep in mind as we continue this conversation. And then there's the do-it-yourselfer. Typically, when we talk about true clouds, this is how Amazon and Facebook and all the big mega-scale data centers build their network. They're not buying anyone's SDN controller. They're not relying on open source cloud management platforms. They're doing it with Python. They're doing it with tools like Puppet and Chef and Ansible and all the automation tools that are out there. But with this, I would also say that you don't have to be Facebook or Amazon to adopt these tools. What these tools also do for smaller customers is to let you automate tasks and let you be more agile without maybe having to go to a full-blown SDN solution. And I think this is a really important piece to understand. For those of you, I did an SDN in the data center session earlier. I'm assuming some of you were probably in that session. And we were down a notch. We were literally talking about SDN solutions inside the data center. But when we think about cloud, or where we want to be when we grow up, or where we want to be in a few years, it is not just all about SDN. There are other ways to do it, and that's what the next couple minutes of this session is going to talk about. You do have options. If you feel like that technology is either too rich, or not too rich, but too advanced or not ready yet, then you should be thinking about, well, hey, look, we're already using Puppet or we're already using Chef for our server admins, right? Server admins don't do anything manually. They would never manually, God forbid, then it would just take them away from gaming. But so if you're a server admin, you probably appreciate that. But there's, it's true, and that's a mentality, right? A server guy thinks about, there is no way I would do a task manually. Everything I do, I automate, provisioning a server, whatever it may be. Network guys think differently. That's not the way we were bred. We kind of came up through the ranks and said, all right, well, we're going to do this manually. When I started to work for SunGard, when I went there, we had a large MPLS backbone, all Juniper backbone. It was about 75 routers, and there was about, 5,000 or 6,000 network elements. So I would go to do a change, and it would take me 8 hours to do a change, because I'd have to log in as 70 routers, pull the commands in. And the guys that I would work with, they would be done like this similar change in 5 minutes. I was like, man, this is not good. I'm going to be in big trouble. Like, how am I ever going to survive in an environment like this? So I taught myself. At that time, Perl was sort of the hottest thing. I taught myself Perl, and I became the guy that could do things automatically in 5 minutes, and I got my Saturday and Sundays back. And that's kind of where the world is really catching up to. I mean, even in the enterprise, it's how do I take the human intervention out of it? How do I start to automate tasks, be more agile, respond to requests a lot sooner? And it doesn't always have to be about SDN or a full-blown Amazon-like deployment. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what your path looks like. Where do you want to be? I do challenge you, if you take anything away from this session, my challenge for you is to, when you walk out of this room and you go home, whether or not you're the decision maker or you're on a team that reports into the decision makers, it's important to think where you want to go. What do you want your network? What do you want your IT infrastructure to do for you? So today, the server guys have all this stuff figured out. Right? If you look at VMware, I mean, they've completely changed how enterprises do business. If you want think about a move as and change, it comes in, right? So you're an end user in your company, you need a new application to be running, and maybe you want to stand up a new CRM application. You go to your IT group, you put in some sort of a ticket, and that kicks off some workflow. There's some storage that has to get taken care of, there's some server stuff that has to get done, there's some network stuff that has to get done. The server guy, he's like, hey, yeah, no problem. You want a new Windows 8 server, and you want these applications to be run on it, no problem. Click a couple buttons, and in about 4 to 6 minutes, you have a new server running. He's done. He goes back to his normal job. The network guy's like, man, I got to set up a couple new VLANs. I got to figure out what IP addresses I'm going to assign to that server. Got to maybe put some firewall filters on the port, do some QoS stuff, whatever it is, configure it. It's not a big deal. These are very, very repetitive, mundane tasks. But what then happens is he says, but I'm not allowed to touch my network switch until the 3rd Saturday of the month. So now there's a delay. The network guy becomes the bottleneck. And this is true in a lot of organizations. I mean, I worked for NASDAQ for a pretty long time. If we wanted to roll out a change, not only could you only do it on a 2nd or 3rd Saturday of the month, you had to roll it out 3 times before it was allowed to successfully stay in. Not until the 3rd time could you leave that change in successfully. And that's because there was a lot of human invention involved, and there wasn't a lot of ability to stage off to the side. Where we want to go is we want to get to here, right? We want to point and click. That's what all this stuff is about. If any of you have subscribed to a hosting service, maybe you host a public website, or you're externally hosting some of your IT solutions in Amazon or Google, you know that you say, oh, I need a new server. You go through some nice, pretty menu. You put in a credit card, and in about 10 or 15 minutes, you've got some resources that you can deploy your services on. Ultimately, that's where you want to get internally as well if you're helping your own customer. Or if you're on the service provider side, then you're missing out on a major opportunity because your consumer does not want to make a phone call, do something manually. He's expecting instantaneous results when he asks to deploy new options, or they'll go to the next person that does enable that. So you have some decisions to make, though. If you are going to move in this direction, are you going to do it with SDN or automation? Are you going to do what orchestration tools are you going to use? Are you the VMware guy? Do you want to go all in with VMware? Do you need some of the customization maybe that you can get out of some of the more open source tools? Security, is it completely integrated? Sometimes we take all this time to build a flat data center network, and then we put a firewall off to the side, and so everything was flat here, but all the traffic has to go through a router on a stick. How do we overcome that? How do we integrate from the beginning? What protocols are we going to use? How intelligent does my network need to be? Does it need to make decisions for me? Should it be self-healing? Should it be proactive? How much trust am I going to put into the tools and the applications that will maybe dynamically move workloads around for me? These are all the things that are really happening in the industry, and a lot of customers are at different timelines of how far along they are deployed. But this is the plan that helps to get you to that end state. All right, so next phase, I would say, would be to assess. Today, I would imagine that most of you in the audience, and I know this just from doing previous polls, so I can assume that it's pretty similar in this environment, your resources are still siloed. When I say that, I mean you have network devices that are allocated to a specific group, or servers that are allocated to a specific group, or they're in dedicated regions within your network, or within your data center. Your network services are physical. They're not distributed yet, so you still have hardware appliances that are, network cable in, network cable out, that are handling, doing your firewalls, your load balancing, value-added services inside your DC. Your tasks are not automated. Orchestration is decentralized, meaning you have a lot of different elements to manage across your storage, across your compute, and across your network. And security is most likely an afterthought, because what happened was you had this existing network, you realized how much important it was to keep on adding more elements of security because we watch how complex things are getting and how much more important it is. But now that security model doesn't fit your original network model. So what's the where? Where do you want to go? What's your path? Where do you want to be? Your resources become pooled. The way a data center should be built today is that everything should just be a pool of resources. You should not have to think anymore about where something sits. First of all, it's inefficient. Second of all, it's more time on your plate that you have to think about where something resides. Network services are virtualized and distributed. So a lot more move towards service chaining, NFV, where we're putting the services like firewalls, like load balancers on virtual appliances and distributing them around our data center. Your moves, adds, and changes that we talked about, you are responding to a click. The network guy is not manually adding that VLAN on the 3rd Saturday of the month. Your orchestration becomes centralized, so that's where the OpenStacks, the Cloud Stacks come in, right? They give us that single entity to drive how we're going to deploy an application and instantiate some of those original moves, adds, and changes. And your security is hopefully completely integrated from the beginning. So with that, what's your plan? How do you do some of this, and how do you start adding value into your network today? Everything that we just talked about, if you were to wait, it's going to take you a couple years to get the fundamentals right, get the network in place that you ultimately want to have. And then, you know what, in 2 years, there's some new stuff that's happening. So you have to be prepared, in my mind, to consistently add value across whatever you have, and then always be planning for what's coming next. And if you do that fairly methodically, and you keep track of what a vendor like Juniper is doing with an assistance from Avology, you can be leading edge without adding risk back into your environment. And to me, that's the biggest piece, because that's what affects uptime and downtime, and ultimately keeps your end users happy. So with that, Juniper offers a few good options to give you a nice set of options or value add from legacy IT as we move into this next generation. So the first would be our integration with our cloud management platforms and automation. OpenStack, CloudStack, Chef Python, talking directly into Juniper firewalls, routers, and switches. The value add here is that you can start to do some of that automation that our DevOps team, our server teams have been doing for a very long while without being too disruptive to your environment. So just think about that. Just think about the manual move, adds, and change starting to get automated and get customized or custom built to work in directly with what's already doing automation in your network. The second, where we start to make this a little easier for you, is that we can proxy those requests through Network Director. So this way, Network Director is part of our Juno Space platform. It's our single pane of glass management tool that allows management across firewalls, across routers, and across switches to give you a single place to manage your elements. In addition to just that, we then also expose the northbound APIs that allow integration with the same tools that we do manually. And then notice that we add VMware vSphere in there as well. 99% of the deployments out there are probably still non-NSX VMware deployments. Yes, vendors, we love to talk about what's coming next. We get very excited about our partnership with NSX and all the cool stuff that we're going to do. But the reality is your VMware 5X, your 4X, it's still here for some time. We're not going to all just convert everything to NSX. Juniper does a phenomenal amount of integration with regular VMware vCenter suite of tools to give you, from our network perspective, to give you visibility into where those VMs live inside your data center, to follow them around as the server teams instantiate VM mobility moves, make sure your port profiles move, your VLANs move, your security settings move, all completely integrated via standard-based APIs with VMware. So as we move into the virtualized world, what's that look like for you, right? This is probably the part you're most curious about. So Juniper has two options. One, well, we have a lot of options, but these are the two big ones. VMware NSX, so we're a really tight VMware NSX partner. For anybody that was in our earlier session, we talked a little bit more in depth about this. For those that are VMware customers or staying VMware customers, we've got you covered. As you start to migrate from 5.5, we have that integration as well. And it's very, very important, just to peek into the future, to make sure that you have a hardware vendor that is integrating in that technology ecosystem, because there is a lot of interaction for visibility, for troubleshooting, for management, to make sure that that partnership exists. And then for those of us, especially our service provider community, we also offer our Contrail controller, which is fundamentally very similar SDN type offering to introduce network virtualization into the data center. Promoted with OpenStack, CloudStack, and also a lot of integration with OSS and BSS type systems from IBM and BMC. So that's a good plan, right? Does that give you a little bit of visualization into what your future looks like? It's good. It's a nice time to start to get your feet wet, start to think about this. How can I automate tests? This is a way that you can go home and start to add immediate value back into your IT infrastructure right now. So with that, I'd like to introduce what we call Juniper Metafabric. We introduced Metafabric to the world October of last year. So we're at about a year now. I think it was October 29th, if I remember correctly. And the idea behind Metafabric was to be much more than just a data center solution, We have a lot of data center solutions, Qfabric, VCF, our standard QFX switching line. We do a lot of cool stuff inside the data center. But with Metafabric, we tried to think a little bit bigger and say, well, we are a routing company, we're a switching company, we're a security company, and it's important that our customers don't have a problem just in the data center. They have a problem connecting multiple data centers together. They have problems in the WAN. They have connect out to public cloud providers. They also have to connect to their campus and branches. And someone has to think about how all this stuff is going to work together. If not, then as we're telling you to go think about your network being more integrated and your networking, your storage, and your compute acting as a single entity, if we're not out there helping you do it, then we're really failing you. So with that, we introduced Metafabric. You can't buy it, you can't license it. Think of it as an architecture or a blueprint for how you go through the next few years of this transition inside your network. Whether or not you do it now or you do it in a few years, I can tell you that this transition is happening. If not, you will be the CIO with the hourglass going in the, unfortunately. So, but it sounds like you're ahead of the game, Liz, so that's a good thing. Yeah. No. The only reason I joke is because there's just there are a lot of people out there that I think still doubt this. And my recommendation to you is if you're in the trenches and you're the guy configuring this stuff, the old way's going away. This is the new generation. It's just when you decide to jump onto the train and start embracing it. And the new way's really exciting. It's a lot of fun. It's not less complex, it's not easier. We're not going to ever get rid of our network engineers. Their tasks are just changing a little bit. They're thinking more like a programmer or a software developer, because the mindset is, it's not about getting the network up and running, it's about how do I integrate with the applications and move at the speed of light. So with that, we bring to you Metafabric. We start in kind of talking about what we use as our 3 guiding principles. So our first is simple. And the idea behind simple is, how do I enable our customers, how does Juniper help our customers to navigate through this? We're saying we want to deliver agility. We're saying we want to be able to respond to our customers a lot quicker. We're saying we want to lower our operational costs. So it's up to us to figure out how to help you simplify that network. So that means whether or not it's creating our fabric technologies where it's simple to manage, and we give you 128 nodes in our Qfabric that are all managed as a single device, or giving you single pane of glass management through Network Director, or integrating with VMware or with Contrail and giving you that overarching visibility as you start to introduce SDN into your environment, and you can troubleshoot just as quickly as you do today. Maybe it's not that quick. Maybe it's faster than you do today. So with open, I think this is probably our most important guiding principle right now. Our job as Juniper, or our belief, our fundamental principle, is to not try and dictate to our customers what your strategy should be. Not try and say, well, this particular hardware only works in this particular architecture, and when you outgrow that, let's reinvest in some other architecture because it has some better capabilities. Unlike some of our competitors who do take a different mentality with that, our approach, and it's not always an easy approach to take, it takes a lot of planning and a lot of thought, is to try and, as much as possible, make sure that we are using building block approach. So our QFX 5100, for example, fits into VCF, fits into Qfabric, also works in a standalone spine and leaf topology. As we move into Juniper and Contrail, OpenStack, CloudStack, Puppet Chef, it's to try and give you choice and to do all that as much as possible with open standards so that we're not creating that lock-in for you. Your ROI will be high. You don't have that maze to a dead end that you worry about, and it probably keeps you up at night on, am I going to have to go back and reinvest because this hardware is going to get me nowhere? Really, really big, important principle to how we develop our products. And then I think the most interesting of the 3 principles is, and where also the most amount of development is happening right now, is around smart. We live in a world, we all talk about big data. The best, no matter what we're in, oil and gas, energy, if we're in financial services, the key to a lot of these companies' success right now is to get data and then do some really cool stuff with it. Either make better decisions about on the products we're going to go deliver, make better decisions on how we target our customers, on how we add value-added services to our customers. Same thing for us. For our world, the data is the information we get out of our switches, network analytics, buffer inputs and outputs, granular interface statistics, and taking all of that data and then doing something really, really cool with it. And not only getting it just from the network or from our firewall or from a router, but also correlating that with VMware, correlating that with EMC, correlating that with all of our technology partners to help make integrated or smart decisions or intelligent decisions around what it looks like across your entire data center. We're past the time of where just the data center is going to be smart. So let me give you an example of this one because I think it's very, very interesting. So this isn't too far in the future either. This is next year time frame. But think about your network, and right now you're getting hotspots in your network. You may not even know about them because you can't even monitor the data quick enough because the intervals, the granularity of the sampling intervals is just too far apart that you can see what happens in those in between 1 second or 2 seconds. So think about, we tighten down the intervals, we're sampling at very, very minute time frames. And now I start to say, hey, look, on Mondays, I start to see this particular trend in this portion of the network. Who knows, maybe one of my customers rolls out a patch or they do some sort of advertising and that rolls up, creates some sort of bandwidth increase in that part of my data center. So now, with the correlation of events between VMware and between Juniper, I'll be able to say, you know what? I know that this typically happens on Mondays around this time. Let me trigger VMware to start moving some servers over to a different portion of the network where I'm running less hot. And so now we avoid that degradation of service to our customers, and we have a better delivery mechanism or a better service that we offer to our internal or external customers. The power in all of this is not just acting as solving the problem within a single switch or a single data center. It's talking to that technology ecosystem and making sure that that data is shared and you're acting intelligently as a suite of partners to you, not a single vendor to you. So this is really cool stuff on what's coming on the roadmap for the solutions. All right, so in Metafabric, we as a company, Juniper has 3 core strengths. First one is switching. We build best-of-breed switches. Our QFX product line, our QFabric product line, what we do with EX9200, these are all best of breed. They all stand alone. And by the way, at the end of the day, none of the hardware becomes any less important in the world that you're going into or the new networks that you're thinking about building. What happens though is there's new features, there's different types of features. We don't really need VLANs anymore. We don't need max scale anymore as we go into this world. But there's important things like hardware gateways and network analytics and overlay visibility tools that become very important. Second is routing. So we are our heritage as Juniper is in routing. We still build best-of-breed routers, our MX, our PTX. I know there's a lot of Juniper customers in the audience, so hopefully you are still very happy with our products. And then security. Our SRX, our virtualization with Firefly, or if you know it as VGW, web app, DDoS secure, these are all products that we've been building for a while. Not that these are any less important, but they now become part of a bigger thing. They become part of Metafabric. And so as a company, we worked very, very hard to pull them together and start to think about how they look, act, and feel when they're deployed as a solution instead of individual entities. But what makes Metafabric really interesting is what I would call the glue. So we've done some pretty key acquisitions to help enable us in this world of cloud. Contrail, probably one of the most significant ones, gives us an SDN offering. Our WANDL solution, which contributes to a lot of the traffic engineering and things we're doing in our WAN solutions for our service providers here. And Altor, right? A lot of intellectual property comes out of what we did with how we actually secure at the hypervisor layer. Our technology alliances, I would probably say, and the reason I put it in the middle is because this is huge. You need to make sure that whoever you're doing business with as your vendor, not just your network vendor, is also working very closely with the other vendors that you partner with. So for us, VMware, IBM, Piston Cloud, Puppet, OpenStack, these are all vendors that we're working very closely with to either certify our equipment with or make sure that it interoperates or co-develop so that integration does exist for you when you go to start deploying. And then lastly, it's all these enhancements that we've done in hardware and software. So not that the hardware becomes less important, but the power that we add with Network Director or our universal SDN gateway that we talked about in our SDN session, EVPN, all the advanced analytics that starts to enable that smart pillar, that smart principle. Our virtual SRX, these are things that we're not only really proud of, but are what help you get into this next generation. Move from the left-hand side of that screen to the right-hand side of that screen in your journey. So with Metafabric, I like to talk about it in layers. So it starts with our foundation technologies. We run a multi-silicon strategy, which we think is very beneficial. Sometimes the merchant silicon, which just about everybody builds most of their top of rack switches today from merchant silicon, that allows you to go to market really quick. It allows you to keep costs down, and it's really good in certain places of your network. But having custom silicon allows us to give you that investment protection, especially in the portions of the network, like the core of your network, that are a lot harder to replace or they're more disruptive to your business. This is just to re-emphasize that QFabric, virtual chassis fabric, what we're doing with our EX and MX solutions, these are standalone solutions that become part of Metafabric. Metafabric does not replace QFabric, doesn't replace VCF. Those are products that are a subset of the end-to-end solution. You have to think bigger. I encourage you, you don't have to do anything, but I encourage you to think bigger about deploying your network and how does this stuff integrate. That is the way that you will reduce your operational costs. That is the way that you will save money. That is the way that you will make your customers much happier over time. So from the overlays, now we start to put NSX and VMware in there. We start to layer that on top. Service virtualization, if you remember, I talked earlier about getting your services, your value-added services like your firewalls, your load balancers off of physical devices and starting to virtualize them because you can now distribute them more appropriately around your data center. This alleviates having to send traffic always to one particular hardware device. You can spin up more virtualized services on demand that are one firewall per application or one load balancer per application, and instead of trying to put that at some central point in your network causing a bottleneck for traffic. And then lastly, how do I integrate all those tools? How do I bring the OpenStack to VMware? So this is, I think it's a nice logical way to think about it from the fundamentals of your network and then vertically integrating across the entire thing. The value that I think Juniper brings here as well is that we really, really focus on how to do this using open standards. Very little about this integration. I don't want to say nothing, that's a pretty strong word, is proprietary where it can be. So standards-based APIs, and not just standard, but widely adopted. I mean, there's a difference between having a standard and then that nobody deploys, or I'll say it, right, Cisco standardized EIGRP, but that still doesn't make it a widely deployed application, right, or protocol. But so using standards that everybody's using, that the whole ecosystem is embracing. And we also are very active in a lot of these communities to help make sure that the community is playing nice and adding more value to you. So end to end, what's Metafabric look like for us? I've got some Contrail, I've got some VMware, I connect your WAN, I'm mindful of your WAN, I got campus and branch, and I'm connecting to what your managed service providers are maybe augmenting your network capabilities with. So in the portfolio, just a couple quick highlights. I'm not going to do any product pitch up here, but if you look at switching, right, our big focus here is to have flexible building blocks. So even as you move from VCF or QFabric or to a standard spine and leaf topology, is to be able to reuse, especially our QFX 5100 series and all the new products that we continue to develop so that they are interchangeable across different architectures. That's one way that we try and add investment protection back to you guys. From routing, probably one of the coolest things we're doing when it comes to SDN right now is with our universal SDN gateway. So the ability to be a hardware gateway for an SDN solution, either NSX or for Contrail, and to on-ramp you either to your WAN, to your branch, to connect to other multi-vendor SDN deployments, and to sort of stitch all that stuff together. From a management place, this is that smart pillar, right? So Network Director for us is probably the hub of where most of the really cool stuff is happening. If any of you haven't had a chance to play with it yet, I strongly suggest that you take a look at it. But this is where your network really comes to life. We give you one place to manage all of your switching, all of your routing. Security comes, Juno Space is the overarching platform, and we also have a security management platform in there as well. But from there, you can do everything from as little as manage a VLAN to talk to VMware solution, follow VMs around the data center, operate end-to-end without ever having to log into a CLI. The next round of Network Director, which comes at the end of this year, is what really tightly integrates with the overlay solution. So I can see what my VXLAN topology looks like. I can see where, how VM1 is talking to VM2 going through the physical network and be able to trace out that end-to-end path. In security perspective, so adaptive security that's completely integrated into the solution. And then lastly is the solutions and services. I think this is where Vology becomes so important, is you guys most likely are not going to do all of this yourself. And look what Lynn just talked about. I mean, it couldn't have been a better setup on sometimes you need help. You need someone to, maybe your staff today isn't ready for this change. Maybe they don't know how. So whether or not it's just some consulting services or somebody to take over the entire thing, it is important to reach out to your vendors, reach out to your partners, and get some guidance on where you want to go. The world is going this way with or without you. It's just about how much you are willing to increase your comfort level and figure out which solution's right for you. So with that, a couple things that we're doing that I think benefits you. Validated designs. So we do validated designs with VMware NSX and with Contrail. A validated design to us is not just a reference architecture where we put out a 10-page white paper. We're talking 300-400-page white papers that show you every single test, every single configuration, every single switch so that you have a reference to look back at. It really does two things. It helps Juniper do a lot of end-to-end testing at a solution level with technology ecosystem partners that we believe are the same partners you're partnering with. And then it also gives us the ability to give you that information so that you can feel more confident in your deployments. We also offer assessment services, so either through Juniper directly or through our partners where, just like Metafabric transformation. So, what's it going to take for you to take this journey and to convert what you have today and start to plan out where should I spend money and at what time frame should I do it? And then lastly is, our partners, right? I mean, look at Vology. We wouldn't be here today. You probably wouldn't have some of the networks that you have if it wasn't for a partner like Vology for us. So, I applaud them for their help, for their guidance, and for just how much they embrace our technologies and help you actually successfully deploy it. So I leave you with this. Look forward. Think about where you want to be. Think about what my network looks like in a year, 2 years, 5 years, and then think about how you're going to get there. So our promises will help you improve network agility and reduce your operational expenses. And then, your path, we want to be evolutionary, right? We want you to be evolutionary. We want you to have networks that you're proud of. When you walk out, your CEO, your CIO says, man, that network's cool. It really does something special. Or it's like the electricity. It comes on, it goes off, it never causes an outage, it keeps everybody happy, and everybody else can keep doing their business. Think about how to avoid that lock-in. No one here has a crystal ball. We, as a vendor, probably are privy to some of the most proprietary knowledge out there because we know what Broadcom's going to do. We know what a lot of the component vendors are going to do. But we don't have a crystal ball to say, well, what will be the best protocol? Is it EVPN or VXLAN or MPLS over GRE or MVGR? Which one of these will come to the top? These are changing so rapidly. I mean, we are in such a different world on how fast these software and these new protocols are coming to life. But what we can tell you is that Juniper is very much focused on how to make sure that you're not ripping this stuff out in a year or 2 years or 5 years and trying to remain that we stay future-proof. And a big part of that is around what we do with our custom silicon, how we embrace open standards, and how we ultimately deliver these solutions to market. So with that, I thank you very much for your time, and I'm around for questions.